Hi, everybody. So if I hear any stomachs growling, we'll know why. I'd like to start out by asking my esteemed panel to please introduce themselves. Start with Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Sandler. I'm the Executive Director of the Software Freedom Conservancy. I am known for my advocacy for software freedom in medical devices, so I'm a cyborg lawyer. I also co-organize the outreach program for women.
Hi, my name is Estelle Weyl, and I'm a front-end engineer. I work for myself, but I work for a lot of companies that are very well known. And since 2007, when I went to my first conference and realized that I was one of the 3 women in attendance, I've been speaking at conferences, training women to be more confident, organizing a series of conferences called Confident Coding. And I'm also an author and a trainer.
Hi, I'm Stanley. I'm a software engineering consultant in the Atlanta area. I also work for myself. I've done a lot of front end, a lot of mobile, some back end, so kind of a mixed bag.
My name's Elizabeth K. Joseph. I'm a systems administrator working at HP. Currently in my role there, I'm on the infrastructure team for the OpenStack project, so I'm working on open source all day long. I also do a lot of volunteer work with the Ubuntu project. And I'm the author of the official Ubuntu book that came out in July. And I also am on the board of a nonprofit that puts Linux-based computers into schools.
I'm Megan Squire. I'm a professor of computing sciences at Elon University. And I also run the FlossMole, Floss Data, and Floss Hub projects. We study how open source is made from a research point of view.
Very impressive. So now we want to be a little more impressed. And we're going to start off by asking you all a question about your earlier days. What made you interested in computer science or technology or open source? A little bit of your histories. And I guess we'll go reverse order here, put you on the spot. You're a doctor, you can handle it.
This is brutal because I don't fit any of the tracks that you're supposed to do. I was actually an art history and economics public policy major undergrad. I didn't ever program. I was just not tracked that way. I didn't discover my ability to program until the internet happened, and that seemed like a fun thing to do, so I took a C class at a community college after graduation, like just for fun, to see what was up with that. And I really loved it. So I went about this all the wrong way. Did grad school while working full-time, just did all the wrong things you're not supposed to do. So I'm probably not the poster child for how to get women involved or whatever, because I kind of just stumbled into it. Once I got there, though, I really liked what I saw. The creativity, the ability to kind of research whatever I wanted, to write my own code and kind of be in control a little bit. I liked that.
For each of you, if there's one person or one event that was influential to you in your decision or in your retention, make sure you mention that person too.
I've had a very good experience with a research mentor who I didn't actually meet until I decided to start studying open source, but it's somebody that is at another university. His name's Kevin Croston. He's been an amazing research mentor and has never made me feel like I was out of place or didn't really know what I was doing or didn't have the right chops because I didn't take this or that class or had a degree from a weird school or things like that. He was always very, very, very supportive. So props to Kevin.
So I sort of got involved with Linux. I'd always played with computers, and then I had a boyfriend who was using Linux, and he got my computer set up, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I figured I could customize my desktop however I like. This is like 2002, and I was using Enlightenment, which meant there was like nothing on my screen when you booted it up. But I could write different config files and like add things. So that's how I sort of fell in love with Linux, because I'm like, I can do whatever I want with my computer. That's great. And then I started going to a Linux users group, and everyone there, there were some kind of awkward people. But for the most part, it was a really supportive group. And they were really nice, and they didn't really pay attention to the fact that I'm a woman, aside from some being afraid of me. And so from there, I actually started a chapter of the Linux Chicks. We called it Philly Chicks. I was living in Philadelphia. And I wanted to gather the women in the area who were together, and then we'd go to the lug together, so it was a little less awkward. And then I started contributing to open source, I guess 2005, when I was sitting in a channel of a piece of software I liked, and one of the lead developers said, I really need to rewrite this documentation. It's really bugging me. And I'm like, yeah, I could do that. How hard is that, right? Okay, it turns out it's actually kind of hard to write documentation. I had to learn DocBook, and that's really hard. But that's pretty much how I got involved. And I soon after got my first junior systems administration job with a company called Linux Force in Philadelphia. The owner of the company, CJ Fernley, he was the guy who ran the lug, so he knew about me through the Linux users group. And then he really supported me as I grew into that role as systems administrator. We also had a Debian developer on staff, Stephen Gran, and he taught me how to do Debian packaging. So I started doing Debian packaging for the first time, and that really is what got me into the open source world a bit more fully than that small documentation project. And then from there, I started working on Ubuntu and the history. So.
As far as getting involved in technology, I've been interested in technology pretty much all my life, and I blame my brother for that. Gaming and that kind of thing and graphics got me into technology. But upon choosing something for college, I was at a crossroads because I'm one of those weird people that loves art as much as I love math. And so my dad gave me the Be Practical speech. So it's really my dad's fault that I'm in computer science right now, or that I took computer science, because it was, to me, a way of marrying both that creativity with, the math and the science background and the love that I had for that. So that's how I got involved in technology. And open source, probably I got started in grad school more so than college. I did a lot of research, and there are a lot of projects that I was using and then later on contributing to. So that's probably my background in open source.
So I'm a little bit older, and I have a similar background of being really good at, and interested in art and math. And I didn't know basically computers, I had no clue what they did or why anyone would want to use them. But I was the only one in my dorm who had one. But I was an architecture major because it combined the art and the math. And while I was not really enjoying architecture, and I was the last woman to drop out of the program, we were 50-50 when we started. Actually, we had more women, and one person from our starting class, one woman graduated. I had one class left, and I was like, you know what? I don't even care about architecture. So it was actually more sexist than our computer science program, which was not at all at the time, but I didn't understand why anyone would want a computer, except for I was the only person who had one. And I actually, towards the end of my college, I was teaching everyone how to use software on these computers because no one knew. And I'm like, you can do so many cool things. But I went on into public health, and I ran youth programs. And after 5 or 6 years of running youth programs and working on the computer at the same time and teaching everyone in all my nonprofits how to use computers, I realized that the computers didn't talk back and they didn't get pregnant. And so I just, was like, I don't have the energy for you anymore, but this is really cool. And, so since 1999, I've been developing websites.
I was always the geekiest person I knew growing up, and that was really encouraged by my father. A lot of geeky women have fathers that encourage them, and it's really fantastic. And it amuses me now that a lot of people assume that I have no technical background in open source software, because that was such a defining, being the geekiest person in your community, in your entire elementary school, in your entire junior high, and your entire high school is really something. So I had that, and then I went to engineering school, and while I'd had I'm also a little old. And so while I had computers at home because my father was an engineer, it wasn't until I got my Unix account in the computer center of my university that I started, I went into this computer center where you had to go if you were going to send email, and I went into this and they were all men, all men, and I was like, okay, no problem. But I start to walk towards a terminal, and people are looking at me funny. I see other women starting to come in, and they turn away. I see ASCII porn. And I'm like, whoa, ASCII porn, right? Because this is the early 90s. And I'm like, whoa, okay. So I went into the the head of the computer center, like there was this guy in the office, and I went to him and I said, just so you know, there's like ASCII porn. Like I feel really weird coming in here, and I'm sure other women do too who have less computer experience than I do. And he said, you're hired. Like, what? And so this guy had a really profound influence on my career. I wound up going to law school after engineering school, and then returning to the field. And what made me really passionate about software freedom is that I found out that I have this heart condition, and I needed a pacemaker defibrillator, which has proprietary software literally sewn into my body and screwed into my heart. And I started to realize the profound societal implications of it. And that's when I got passionate in my current career.
Very personal story. Okay, continuing on the personal, I would like for each of you to think back to what you've observed in your careers. And I know we have varying lengths of careers, but what have you observed? Have women that you've known and men that you've known followed the same path, either in technology, in their careers, or in open source? Or do you observe that it happens quite differently for men than women? It's really something I'm curious about. And whoever would like to jump on that one first, I won't make you go up and down the line. Anyone have some observations they'd like to share?
I'll start just because I will. No. What I've noticed is that, I'm in terms of being a front-end engineer, I'm at a pretty high level, and the people that are my compatriots, the men tend to be working for large corporations, and the women tend to have stepped away from the corporations and are working for themselves, whether they're starting their own consultancy or like myself, just freelance. Well, it's a consultancy, but I don't have a business name and I don't market myself. I just freelance. But they've kind of stepped away from the hierarchy of moving up the ladder. And I think what I did notice, this was many years ago when I was, middle range, was that any woman who was decent as an engineer would get kind of like, do you want to be a PM? Do you want to manage the engineers? But not as an engineering manager, but as a human resources more type role. And the men were promoted to be the senior developer and actually the VPs of engineering. So it was kind of like these two paths, and they kept asking me to go into these, attend 55,000 meetings, but don't actually architect a site. And I'm like, well, there's no path for me to go this way, so I have to go over here and to promote myself. So that's in terms of the higher level. But in terms of entering the field in the first place, I think one of the reasons that I pick the careers that I have is because my parents are sexist, and I want to piss them off. But a lot of people, have their parents who are sexist and are just like, okay, I should be doing this career or that career. I looked up today. My first computer was it's called an Atom, or Corelco Atom or something like that. The reason that I had the Corelco Atom, it was my father's, and it was in his office in the basement, so I had to go into his space to use it, was because my younger sister wanted a Cabbage Patch Kid, and it came with the free Cabbage Patch Kid, and there was no other way to get Cabbage Patch Kid, so that's how I got introduced to computers.
Sorry. No, go ahead. So strictly on the open source side, I've noticed a lot of women who I work with who do volunteer work initially, they get pulled into a women in project very fast. So we sort of get involved, we're starting to get to know people, and then I used to work a lot on Ubuntu Women, and we say, you're a woman, you should join our group. They quickly get detracted into doing feminist stuff. Like when I started in technology, I didn't really, I was one of those, I'm not a feminist, I love men. And then I quickly learned what feminism actually means. So I got quickly dragged into that conversation, and that really detracted from the technical track I was in. And I find that happening with a lot of women. This also causes a bit of an existential crisis where you're like, I'm in open source and everyone is horrible and this is very sad. And then most of us get over it, but a lot of women quit. I also noticed there's a correlation between how quickly you get hired in the industry and what you get hired for. Most women I work with in open source actually are paid to work in open source, whereas I think a greater percentage of men are doing it not being paid. And I think part of that has to do with general societal responsibilities still weighing heavily on women. So statistically, I think men have more free time than women. So if you want women to be involved in open source, if you pay them, that's a really good way. And I think that's one of the reasons the outreach program for women is so successful.
I mean, that's why we designed it that way, basically acknowledging them, basically looking at all the reasons why we think women might be staying away and try to address them all systematically so that we can bring more women into the field and then slowly address that. But you were going to respond to the question.
Oh, no, I was just going to mention, I agree with a lot of the things you said about tokenism and exceptionalism and unicorn laws and all of that sort of good stuff. My experience was a little bit different, as I mentioned, but here's some fun facts. I had never worked with or been interviewed by another woman until I entered academia. So that was kind of interesting and odd. I worked at 5 startups, 3 of them in the RTP before I, finally cut the cord and went into academia full time. And I didn't realize that until it happened, until that happened. And I actually sat down in someone's office and I was like, that's a female. That's weird. And then it was like, wait a minute, really? And I started dialing it back, and it was like, whoa, I've been the only, and it was weird. That was a very odd thing. So I don't know if it was just very strange. Definitely a different career path.
So I've noticed that the career path of women that I've come into contact with is very kind of convoluted compared to the guys that I've met. A lot of the guys that I've met kind of do the traditional computer science and then go out and get a software engineering job, and it just makes sense. But I think there's a lack of exposure in a lot of cases for many women. And so something I'm seeing right now, I'm also the organizer for Women Who Code in Atlanta. And one of the things that I'm seeing in that organization is that there are a lot of women who did not even know that these opportunities were kind of available to them. And so there's a lot of mid-career switching, and then there's a lot of kind of, I'm new, I'm trying to figure this out. I didn't go to school for computer science. How do I get involved in this? It sounds really cool. So it's very, to me, non-traditional, at least in the women that I've observed.
I've seen a lot of women that are junior find that they have to work that much harder to be taken as seriously. So you have to work a lot harder, and you constantly are put in a position where you have to explain or justify your work and your involvement. And this is actually where the women in project groups really help, because it's kind of a support group. And so, and when you start seeing, once you see, it can't be unseen, right? So that's part of the reason why people start getting, a little bit more feminist when they join these groups. And they're very helpful. But what happens is that a lot of women just get so tired, right? It's such hard work, and so it becomes easier to just do something else, and that's really sad.
I think also, I'm a member of the Ubuntu Community Council, and we're an elected group of people from the Ubuntu community. So there's 7 elected people, and then there's Mark Shuttleworth. We were sitting in a community council meeting, and Mark goes, and I'm the only woman on the community council at that time. He's like, Liz, can you take notes? and I did. So in addition to having to work harder and in my own technical role, I'm the one who gets the coffee. I mean, still, this still happens. I'm taking notes and
all
I'm doing
the time.
meeting, and I watch Mad Men, and I'm like, that's not even funny. This is really hard to watch because it still totally happens. So I'm doing my own workload plus all of this soft skill stuff that I'm good at, but I want to work on a Puppet config.
And one more point, that kind of plays to something that both of you were saying, actually, about when women do get into these positions, how they're kind of pushed towards more the human resources, the soft skill side of things, and not having that engineering manager, technical manager track. I mean, I think that does play into, for instance, why I've gone into working for myself, because I can promote my own ideas and getting those ideas heard. In tech companies, even if you're a senior software engineer, I think being a woman does affect that, because you're still in a room full of guys and you're trying to get those ideas, pushed forward, and it can be a little difficult.
And the truth is, in terms of, when I've worked for people, I've had both male and female leads, and some of that touchy-feely human resourcey thing is not a typical male skill, but I would like it to become a male skill. Instead of always saying that the women have to remember the birthdays in the office, why doesn't the male boss remember the women, everyone's birthdays in the office? So I would like to not have women try to become more like men, but have men try to become more like women at an equal ratio, and then, we can all be happy.
I'm happy to say I did not organize the virtual baby shower in my team.
I did organize the baby shower, and I knew that if I wasn't the one who did it, it wouldn't happen.
Well, the mail sat in my inbox for like a week, and I'm like, someone else is going to reply to this. Someone else is going to take it. And then one of the guys on our team did. And it was a virtual baby shower for one of our male colleagues.
Yeah.
So
it was for
cool
a male
too.
colleague as well. Yeah.
So you're teaching the guys how to do it.
Or just waiting long enough till someone has to pick it up off the floor.
Today, when I was talking, I mentioned the number of women who are entering the degree fields that we're talking about has declined significantly since the 80s. So it was like 37% in the 80s, and now it's like 12%. And there was an NPR set of research that came out. I was reading it, and I think it actually was broadcast again today. And it talked about some of the factors. One of the things that they found in their research about what drove that departure, and what they have come up with is one of the factors was mass advertising of personal computers, and the advertising being really targeted to men and all the signals to men about get your boy a computer, and so that was really interesting research, I thought, and I thought it was important for all of us to be able to acknowledge, like, wow, that's what happened, because it's just so fascinating to see the numbers and how they just drop like a rock, whereas law, medicine, moving up, and I went to law school, and 50% of the women, 50% of the population in my law school was women, and just when I went,
50% of law students are women.
Yes.
But when you look at in the field, especially at the senior level, it's really not the case.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed. But
But they're at least
much better
starting from a
chance
higher-
of
yeah.
So
It's not at
I'm like,
12%.
to have some reasons to be able to look to and go, okay, we can influence this, and look at was it Harry Mudd College or University? Harvey Mudd, thank you. What they've done. So to your point, the non-traditional track seems to be an important track for women, and there are some programs now that are getting traction that have a kind of a jump start or starter program for women in college, so that they can actually start on an even playing field with the men. And so a recognition of what you've experienced is really what people are recognizing is a typical experience. And so that's one thing that we can do as a society to improve the numbers. So the question, though, I have for you is that really important? Is diversity important in technology and in open source? And if so, why do you think so? And if not, I have a feeling you might think so, but you may not. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Is anyone jumping in to go for that one first?
I'll take that one. I think if you plan to build software for people, then diversity has to be extremely important for you, because you want a variety of perspectives, and you're not going to be building to one target. You're going to be building for this wide, very varied group of people. So you would want as many different ideas and many different backgrounds to contribute to the eventual product or the eventual idea. So I think that's probably the biggest reason.
I wanted to go back really quick to the 12% and that kind of leaky pipeline, and the reasons were because Revenge of the Nerds came out in '86 or something like that. So every couple of years this happens where somebody does some research and they find a factor. And it turns out that if you look at the 20-some, 30-some years of research since we got on that roller coaster down, ski slope downwards to 12%, people find a new factor. And I don't think that any one of those is the factor. This is a complex polynomial. We have a lot of math going on there, and there's a lot of surveys that need to be done, and there's a lot of introspection that has to happen, and that needs to be done in a serious and respectful way to the whole problem and that hairball of nastiness that is that equation. So I get a little bit perturbed when I hear a study like that comes out, and people say, "Oh, it's the movies. Next," and we just read it off, and like we're not gonna. No, we absolutely need to look backwards and really pick at that thing and give me some funding, and we'll do this. But take it seriously and give this problem the respect that it deserves, so that forward-looking, we can have a reason for doing the policy plans that we all think are going to be the panacea. So I just wanted to say that from a science point of view.
Then why do you think it's important?
Why do I think the whole thing is important? Well,
Why is diversity important? If you want to speak about that.
from a science point of view, diversity is important to maintain. Otherwise, you end up with everybody doing the same thing. You have to have a variety of perspectives. I think that's, a given. I agree with everything that Erica said.
And, maybe the fact that women are coming towards computer science, as a career from a different perspective, right now that adds a lot of diversity, because if all of your students come through the computer science program, they might have taken the one psychology class and the one French literature class to for the requirements, but you have like this narrow path and this narrow path of thinking. So, from a public health perspective, I have a completely different way of, my master's was in health and social behavior. Sounds completely irrelevant, but that is so relevant to computing. So maybe all computer scientists, like all all software developers should be in health and social behavior, because that is what we are doing online. So basically just different perspectives. And if you are, people want to make money off the web or, making software, and if you are only targeting one small population, you are missing out on, 75% of the population, because it's not, generally it's white men, and in this room, that's the majority. Well, not actually right now, but maybe. This morning it definitely was. But there's non-white people and there's non-male people, and you want to target them. And there's also children and senior citizens. And if you're all in the 24 to 35 age bracket, it's not just diversity in terms of men and women, but full gender diversity, sexual orientation diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity, religious diversity, and age. And right. I think ageism is another huge problem in our industry.
I think also some of these things are a little self-fulfilling too, and as the numbers, become so stark, I think that recent studies have shown that as early as 20 months old, we are teaching boys and girls differently, that we're teaching math concepts to boys at that young age, and that we're doing things like helping girls. So parents are actually interfering with what their children are doing and helping girls more than boys. And I found this actually with my own daughter, that I was helping her a lot. And I read the study and I said, oh no. And I stopped helping her so much, and I can see already she's becoming a better problem solver, and she has the triumphs of solving some things herself. And so I think the fact that there have been so few women, and the fact that that number has been getting starker and starker, has then reinforced people's subtle beliefs about gender roles, which we then teach to young people before they even know what math is, before they even know the word computer. Well, actually, my daughter knows the word computer, but it's amazing how early these things start. Mm-hmm. And I thought that your keynote was excellent in talking about the wasted potential. And when you think about all of the little girls out there that are getting bombarded with subtle messages that science and math and these kinds of things are not for them, you think about all of those, the brilliant minds here and there that are just being turned off before they even know that it's something they can do. It's so sad.
Yeah, and I think related to that, if you don't believe in diversity for some reason, like you don't believe in any of the studies and all of the research that shows that it actually matters, that you made a really great point in your keynote about the lack of talent we have in the industry. Not only male to female ratio, but in the United States in general, we really don't have enough people to fill the jobs that we have. So even if you don't care about diversity, we need to engage all these other people in order to fill the jobs, because it's only going to get worse if we don't start engaging more people.
And I was going to say, as a follow-up to that, I think we're talking way more about sexism in the industry, and there's way more sexism that's so obvious online, like with things like Gamergate. But the other thing is, I think there's more talk about and more sexism, and you see the misogyny more because there's so many more opportunities right now that are just growing out of this, like Girls Who Code, Girl Develop It. There's a Hack Bright Academy in San Francisco, which is just awesome. It's a 6-week program where they take women out of any career, and it's a 6-week program, and you're a Ruby developer Python developer actually, when you're done in 6 weeks. And they say, I'm an engineer, and it's just like, yes.
We need to make sure that we keep those women in the pipeline, and then we don't focus entirely on the front, and then get them all excited about coding, and then drop them off at the door of somewhere where that is unsustainable? Just throwing that out there.
Well, that leads to, yeah, that resonated. No, that's great. That leads to what else can we be doing? So you pointed out it's not one thing. There's a whole system that created the world we're in right now. So many different factors. Things like the way that we subtly signal to children, right? But then I had many people come speak to me after my own experience, which I've been heckled about, is that my daughter, who's 14, can't get her interested, been talking about it her whole life, and she'll say stuff like, well, I guess I have to be a software engineer because my mom says I have to. And I'm like, come on. This is exciting stuff. It's important for the world, But there are, girls get to an age, 6th grade-ish, and they just start to turn off naturally. Not all of them. And I'm very well aware that many are not, but many do. So you cannot paint with a broad brush what the one thing is, right? But there's clearly a problem. So we talked about some things to do. I'd like to really throw it out there a little bit more to really hone in on tangible things that you could see that we can be doing as a community to change the tide, if you feel like you can share something like that.
I'll do a quick one. Mine's easy because I'm the teacher that will get that student that comes in and goes, I have to be a software engineer, teach me to code. So one of the things that I do to make sure that I have diversity in what I do is provide a variety in the types of problems that we solve in my class. So if I'm teaching CS1, programming 1, Java, intro, Java, or Python, whatever it is, I don't just do math problems. I also don't just do puzzles. There's no Fibonacci sieves. Anybody remember the prime number sieves or Fibonacci? Okay, no, we don't do that. Variety of problems, a variety of approaches that are going to hit, hopefully, the variety of students that I want to see in my room. So just focusing on that and not bringing all the crap that we had to slog through, right? All the terrible teaching methods that we had and the inattentive TAs and the what you're going to learn calculus by watching me do calculus, all of that. No. So just really focus on the variety of people that you want to produce at the end and that diversity in even your methods.
I have a really simple one, which is to help women avoid being overlooked. When a woman makes a point, amplify that message. Women have I can't tell you how many meetings I have been in where I've suggested an idea, nobody says anything, and then 5 minutes later, somebody says the same idea, and then suddenly it's that guy's idea.
Raise your hand if you've experienced this.
Yeah. Also, right? Also, you'll get interrupted more. There's statistics about interruption. Women will definitely get interrupted more. It's harder for us to make our points. And if we are the ones who try to call that behavior out, we look whiny. We look in ways that are very unfavorable that are associated with women. So it becomes very difficult for, we can more easily champion each other, and I encourage all the women here to do that. But this is something where in geek feminism, they call it magic man sparkles. And I'm serious, I heard that and I was like, whoa, it's really just like that. If you hear a woman say something, don't just repeat, but amplify. Help bring attention and credit to the person who made that suggestion. Help women avoid being interrupted, and help them participate on their own merits rather than being just discriminated against subtly over and over again.
That's a great point. I'm just going to echo this because at Grace Hopper, Carolyn Samard talked about this and the studies that they've done out of Stanford. The data is there. This happens. And there are ways to overcome it if you're in a leadership role or in a team. Either way, exactly what she said. That's one of the really important strategies as a manager to say, I want to hear from this person, right? Call that person out, get them to speak, or to amplify what someone else has said. It's a great idea. And so she's actually put together some exercises that teams can use to experience it, and to be that person that doesn't get listened to, and then to really highlight the strategies you can use to make your team more inclusive in an environment. And all culture shifts when a climate of a team shifts, right? It takes each team, each working group, that culture, when you have enough of those cultures shifting, that's when you have a larger cultural change. So That's why I think every one of us can have an impact that's positive on inclusion. Sorry to preach. What else have you...
Go ahead and preach.
What other suggestions?
Well, I freelance at a company called SurveyMonkey, which you've probably heard of, and they actually get a lot of the graduates from Hackbright Academy. And I don't know if you've heard of the Dave to girl ratio, but on an average engineering team, there's as many women as men named Dave or David. So we had a boy to Shilpa ratio on a team that I worked at. We had as many men on the team as women named Shilpa, and I had never met a Shilpa before this. So we had 2 Shilpas, 2 men, and myself. So it was more women. And the reason that SurveyMonkey is doing such a good job of having so many women, especially just recent graduates, is they have a mentorship program. So they actively recruit junior engineers, and they assign them to someone who's been there for a while, and they work on introductory projects to begin with, and they get exposed to everything. And it's also a great working environment for parents. So, because if your kid is sick, you can just leave. No one's like, you weren't at work today. It's unlimited time off if you get your job done. And both of those factors together make it so not only can women start up, but they can actually continue. And then we also have tons of fathers. There's retention, even though maybe the technology isn't the most advanced in the world, but people want to work there because it's such a good environment. But bringing the women up, and they actually stay there for a fairly long time. So that's just mentorship.
So with Women Who Code, we try to address this problem from a few different angles, because what we see a lot of times are the people who are just starting their careers, the very new developers, the people who are maybe switching careers, and then women who are maybe senior level developers but don't get a lot of that support. Also, we work with youth programs. So we're trying to combat the problem from a few different ways. So we try to work with youth because we want to get there before those preconceptions are formed, before they just young women sign out. And so we've worked with a few programs with immigrant girls, and this was beautiful because they had none of these notions of men do this and women do this. They weren't in the public school system, so they were completely not exposed to that societal women do this, men do this, and it was beautiful to see the kinds of ideas and the excitement for it. Also, we're working on a few youth programs with girls, and something that we noticed was when you say, we're going to teach you to code, or we're going to teach you how to work with computers, that turns them off. One of our younger people in the program told us is that if you say you're building apps, that really gets young women involved, because it's like, I can create something. And so kind of turning it around and not making it just about a computer, and not just making it about this very impersonal kind of relationship, but saying I can create something. But also for some of the newer developers, and also for some of the senior level developers, having that support system. Like, there's so many times in our meetings where women were telling me that this is the most women I've ever seen at any kind of technical event ever. And just having, seeing someone that looks like me is so important. So we can do more of that. A lot of the times I feel that this is a self-perpetuating problem because there's so few women in technology. There will be so few women in technology. We tend to pick people who look like ourselves. We tend to pick people in which we see some kind of similarity. But because there's so few women to make those kinds of decisions. And so just reinforcing that with networking opportunities, with mentoring, to show that there are women who have done this before. You can do it too. So we've tried a few different ways to work with that problem.
That's very interesting, because people who want to find people who look like them, they want to give them things, and they have the same values as people they're looking for. So I think taking a careful look at the values you have in your company or your project, your organization, is really important. I live in San Francisco, so there's Silicon Valley, and there's lots of tech apparently there. So, but you look at the job descriptions, and they're like, solve hard problems, get lots of money, high risk. It's like. And these are scary things, and I'm risk adverse. and I know a lot of women are, because a lot of us have responsibilities. Like, I can't just take a startup job and then be unemployed for 3 months. Like, I have responsibilities, and I have pretty much my entire adult life. Getting paid lots of money, definitely pay me market rate, or I'm going to be very upset. But giving me lots and lots of money on top of that is not going to make me work on something I don't want to work on. So the values for me are more like, work on something interesting, not necessarily hard, because hard, I don't know if I could do hard, but interesting, like that would be great. I mean, I definitely can do hard. But when I'm thinking about it, like yeah.
Go ahead. You make a really good point about that, because studies show that women are much less likely to apply for jobs they're not as qualified for. So men are much more likely to apply for those reach jobs, and women are more likely to apply to jobs where they match a much higher percentage of the descriptions. And employers often don't think about that. They're looking for the unicorn, but they're also going to put a wish list in the job description. And if you're looking to attract more women, a lot of companies have found that if they edit their job descriptions to be more approachable, then they'll have much better luck at attracting women to those positions.
I think we actually have a tendency to, as women, apply for things that we have experience doing, whereas when we're socialized that if this is a job description, then we should have had experience doing that. Whereas I think in general, and obviously this is not everyone, but men are generally more socialized to say, are you capable of doing this? And so if I have 5 years experience on something, I will apply for it. But if a gentleman has the thought, I think I can do that, then they will apply for it. So I actually, when I apply for jobs, I pretend I'm like, okay, what would a man do? Would they apply for this? Yes, okay, I can.
Oh my gosh, I do that all the time. So what would a man do? Would a man ask for a raise? Then I should ask for a raise.
I wanted to bring up some data for these 2 points. There was one point about risk averseness, and so there is some data that shows that if you look at the counts of the majors, not just the percentages, like 12% female or whatever, but people who major, we know that we get an uptick in majors during and right after a bubble, so an economic bubble, but that only holds true for male enrollees. So women are much more risk averse in choosing a major based on economic factors. We can just see that purely from the numbers. And then you said, what I really like, and what you said also, is women get really turned on when you start talking about like apps or the interestingness of the problems. So that's another approach that we can take as educators or as people at sort of that middle point of the pipeline, is to try to make sure that we're focusing on the fact that you're not making money with this choice necessarily. I mean, you are. Let's hope you are. But really, you're solving problems, and that this is the meat of the job. We noticed that in other fields that do that, medicine, biology, astrophysics, I mean, they have big, interesting problems to solve. And sometimes I think in computer science we don't. We cut ourselves short, or we work on some picky little thing. Let's make my optimizing compiler run 0.005 seconds faster. This is not interesting, especially if you're not in it for the money. So let's make sure that we're providing a variety of solutions that a lot of different kinds of people will grab onto and get excited by. And if you have to call them apps, cool, let's call them apps.
Okay, we're going to now go for the uplifting. Love to know, what is it that you've done in your career to date that you're most proud of? Hopefully relating to technology. But if not, that's okay too. Don't start with...
Should it be related to diversity or just related to technology?
What are you proud of? Yeah. What have you made an impact in?
Mine's not related to technology. I mean, I'm proud of a lot of the stuff I did in technology, but when I was still in public health, I started a youth program called it was called POWER, Providing Opportunities, Work Experience, and Responsibility. And I had 18 girls in this summer program. Their average income for a family of 4 was $11,000, so they were really, really low income. And their chance of graduating from high school without a child, either one, was about 33%. And POWER stood for providing I already said that. And all of them graduated high school without having children. And it was a class that taught him how to get a job. And this was back in 1997, they learned how to use the web, they learned how to build the resume, they learned math skills, and they just saw that there was something else in life. So back then, computer science wasn't the huge major that it is now, but I think all of them were able to realize that there was something beyond working at Walmart. And that's, I think, what, bringing it back to technology, we just have to provide girls with, and actually all children, with, this is what you could be capable of. Open your eyes and see what's out there. And it doesn't necessarily have to be technology. Yay if they become a doctor. Yay if they become an attorney, too. Or maybe not an attorney. No, I'm just kidding.
I think I'm most proud of, it's not very technical, but I guess it's related. I'm most proud of having the kind of background that allows me to be a mentor for so many women getting into technology, for so many minorities getting into technology, and seeing their growth and seeing someone who didn't know if this was something they wanted to do, and then seeing them actually get that first developer job or seeing them excel. Seeing them, that whole process and being able to, at any part of it be some kind of help is probably the thing I'm most proud of.
So I wrote a book. That was really awesome. I never thought I could, and I wanted to. So. So it was on my bucket list, and it was actually a rewrite. It was like 8th edition, but whatever. My name's on the cover. Totally counts. And now I have another book contract, for real, like a whole book. So I'm super excited, like all on technical stuff, and I'm really happy and a little scared about this next book. But it's something I never thought I could do, and then I made the time, and it actually happened. So that was really awesome. And then to continue this vein, at my wedding, my maid of honor, who is now working in technology, said that I was the reason why she's on this career path, and she's really happy with her job and making lots of money. And I almost cried. I was like, oh my God. And that happens. I mean, you become a mentor, and it feels so great to be there for people and watch how much they succeed. Like I've mentored women who are now like way more successful than me, and plus like they invite me to conferences and stuff. So it's,
I'm just super proud of my students. I think it's a really lucky job that I get where it's that cheesy quote, I keep getting older, but they stay the same age. I get these nice little students come through, always in that 18 to 22. I get to watch, not always, but most of the time I get to watch them sort of grow and develop into people, and then they go off and get a job, and the next batch comes in, and they come back from, homecoming or whatever and tell you what they're doing, and it's really cool. It's a really great feeling. Men, women, whatever, they're all doing great, and they just seem so happy. It's wonderful to see them in a field like this that's so creative and allows them to just really be working on cool stuff. So I'm very, very, very proud of my students.
I'm mostly proud of the fact that I was able to turn something that was such a scary personal thing of my heart condition, which was, and my fear of sudden death, and my how awful it was to not be able to review the source code in my own defibrillator, and turn that into a way to articulate why software freedom and free and open source software generally is important. And the most rewarding thing about it has been hearing other people tell my story to explain why these issues are important. And I think that I'm so grateful for having had that opportunity.
I'd like to give a round of applause to my esteemed panel. Great stories, and I'm very inspired by all of you, so thank you. I think our time is up, but I know some of you may have questions, so I believe that the panel will be around for questions and would love to interact with you. Thank you for your attention.